All right, well, I think we will go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming this evening. I'm Rhonda Heights with the Munroe-Meyer Institute, and we are here this evening to discuss transition and the education supports and services that are available for youth during that time. Just a little bit real quick about our program. I am part of the Family Care Enhancement Project at the Munroe-Meyer Institute, which consists of parent resource coordinators. And those are all parents of children with disabilities or special needs who have specialized training. We assist other families in navigating to get services to different programs, and basically just kind of being a referral source and helping them get connected to the things that might be helpful for them. Our hope is to meet those social determinants of health, which are the non-medical needs that, as we all know, affect health outcomes. This is our team. As you can see, we are growing. Across the state, we have locations here in Omaha, both at MMI and at other clinical locations, including One World, Boys Town, and Charles Drew. We also have clinics in Kearney, Lincoln, Norfolk, and we are expanding to Gering and Scottsbluff. So we can also help people throughout the state access resources and get connected as well. So tonight, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this session, so it will be available probably in a week or so. So if you want to go back and revisit, if there was something you missed or if someone else wants to take a look at it, more than welcome to do so. But we do ask that you please keep your microphone muted. And any questions that you may have, please submit them to Jennifer Hansen in the chat. We will have also a poll towards the end of the session to give us some feedback to see what we've been doing well, if this hit the mark, if there's something else you want more information about. So please take a second. It's very short, like 3 or 4 questions, and just let us know how we were doing. So tonight, I'm really excited. We have Sandy Peterson and Holly Schwietz from PTI. They are going to be talking about the wonderful all of the things that kind of encompass and go into those educational supports and getting your kiddo ready for transitioning to adulthood services. Sandy is the transition coordinator and Holly is the family employment awareness coordinator. So I'm really excited to hear and have them share their information. If you have any questions, if you'd like or you want to get in contact with either Jennifer or myself, it's just our contact information. And this should all be in the slides that I sent if you were registered prior to noon this morning or today. But if you have any questions, please let us know. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Sandy and Holly take the floor.
Holly, are you throwing the first presentation up? Atta girl.
There I am.
You gonna do full screen or?
I'm gonna.
From beginning, I like that.
Ta-da.
Well, the way we've kind of divided this little puppy up tonight is that I'll start, talk a little bit about PTI Nebraska, who we are, that kind of thing. Because everybody doesn't know who we are, although after as many years as we've been at this, it seems like that should be the case. We just don't have the money to advertise, maybe that's it. And then when I'm finished with the transition as far as the high school and in-school part of things, then we're gonna move to Holly and she's gonna talk to you about employment and the different pieces of that and so forth. So hopefully we kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone tonight and give you enough information to be dangerous. So
To be dangerous, yeah. Ask some questions. That's right.
Yes, and we'd love it if you'd ask questions. That's great. So PTI Nebraska is a statewide organization. We provide supports and services to families of children who have disabilities and special health care needs. We're statewide in Nebraska. There is a PTI in every state in the country. That's part of IDEA, the federal law. When that started, so did so did these organizations. And in Nebraska, there's just one of us, and we're located out of Omaha. We serve the entire state, but we're located in Omaha. There are states that have 5 and 6 PTIs within them. Go on back, Hall. And they're set up and called a variety of different things because they do different things in their states. But like Kansas has one, and it's called
Families Together.
Families Together. So it just kind of depends on the state and how it's organized, but it's based on population, obviously. So California, New York, places like that have several. We serve families of children between the ages of birth and 26, anywhere in the state. The whole idea is, as our name would tell you, that it's training, information, and support to parents. And we're a nonprofit, which means that our financing comes from federal and state grants. And that's how we function. We live and die by the grant, as they say. Go ahead. All of our staff are parent professionals. I'm the only one that's a grandparent professional, but the professional parts are finance, education, movie making, and a variety of other professional endeavors. We talk to parents and professionals and anybody else that wants to call us and ask questions. We're open to community members and so forth. But right now, because of the pandemic and everything else, it's phone, text, email, Zoom, and in person, hopefully coming soon. Everything that we do at PTI Nebraska is confidential, and there is no cost. And I always forget to say that because I know that, but I do have parents every once in a while say, what's this going to cost me? And it's like, no, sorry, I forgot to tell you, there is no cost. We focus on a lot of things, but the areas of expertise include early intervention, special education, healthcare services, young adult transition, disability specific information, community resources, adult services, you name it. I mean, we could keep going. Some of the things that we do are phone consultations. We also, if you would like to send us any of the school documents, the MDT, the IFSP, the IEP, other kinds of documents from a school like the prior written notice. A lot of times families don't know what those are about, or they have questions about why the document says what it says. And oftentimes if we have a chance to study them, we can thoroughly answer those questions. So we have those come back and forth on a regular basis. I think I've been through 5 or 6 IEPs this week. We attend MDT and IEP and student planning meetings for support to families. We are not a legal agency. We do not do legal services. We're an advocacy group, and we try to support and help families understand what their rights are and the rights of their children. We do workshops, we do webinars, i.e. tonight, and we also have done podcasts. So now I'm at a place where I'm ready to get started with the young adult transition part of things. So this is the school part. This is the part that's the IEP, the transition plan, all of those pieces that make up the school part. So right now, the law requires that starting at age 16 in Nebraska, there would be a transition plan. But last week, the legislature made a move and have moved that age to 14. So we'll be driving junior high, middle school staff nuts with talking about and trying to teach them all about transition planning and how that works and what the assessments are all about, and on and on and on. It's a whole new group of people to teach and to help understand the processes and why that transition plan is so darn important. So
that literally passed yesterday. So it'll be a little minute before Nebraska Department of Ed wraps their brain around how to implement this. So what do you think, Sandy? You think it would be 2022?
I would kind of hope it'd be start of next year. I serve on the Nebraska Transition Advisory Committee for the state, and We've been talking about it now for quite some time. So they're starting to develop plans, modules that teachers can go to learn, et cetera, on their own time. So between all of that kind of activity, I hope that we've got a pretty good handle on the ways to get started. I guess we'll see. I don't know how long it'll take the state to be up and running, but the sooner the better as far as I'm concerned. But knowing that, to be real honest, the law says that a family can request that the transition plan starts earlier than 16 years of age. So, you know, that is something that you can ask for. And as long as everybody agrees that that would be a positive thing to do for your young person, then, you know, you can go ahead and get that plan started early. So the use of transition assessments as the foundation to developing measurable post-secondary goals is really kind of the brass tacks of the way the whole thing starts. If you were building a house and you're putting in the foundation, you know that if a strong foundation means that your house is probably going to last many, many years to come. It's the same kind of thing with transition assessments. The law requires that there are assessments every year. Those assessments are about a variety of different things. Can be everything from your young person's self-esteem, all the way to how they make their bed, to what they know about their body, to can they do their own shower, all the way from that to then these pieces of employment, education, training, and independent living. So it's a broad scope. And depending on the kiddo, you know, for those young people who aren't able to speak for themselves, possibly have multiple disabilities, it's really important that all of those assessments lay a better foundation, to be really honest, than for some of the other kids, because what happens is that foundation and those pieces of information really do lead us to good quality goals. If we don't have good assessment, then, you know, it's kind of out the window, to be really honest. So I harp about assessment when I talk about the entire IEP and the transition plan a lot, because it really is the foundation for all of it. Now, when I say measurable post-secondary goals, those are, the goals are written to be about what your child wants to do after they graduate from high school, after they get the signed diploma. What is it that they want to do in these areas? And so again, we talk about employment, education, training, and independent living, if that's appropriate, you know, for some young people. Although I would tell you that I don't know an 18-year-old that probably couldn't use some independent living support. At least my children and my grandchildren could. So, you know, it's something that you really need to determine as a team. We include needed appropriate services, and then we'll talk a lot about identifying the interagency responsibilities and who those agencies are coming down the pike here.
Sandy and Holly, I just wanted to ask a quick question. Would you rather take questions as they come, or would you rather they wait till the end of the session?
We don't care. I don't think. Do we?
Okay.
No, go for it.
Okay.
Okay, we just had one come in that's pertinent to what you're saying here, so
Okay,
maybe it makes sense if you're okay with it.
sure.
When should the transition assessments begin, and will the school do these?
Okay, so yes, it's the school's responsibility to do the transition assessments. Legally, it's a requirement that you know, they do one or more on a yearly basis. Again, I'm saying, you know, one, I don't know if you'd learn as much as you need to learn about a young person to be able to complete all of this. By the time we're finished with my part of the presentation, you kind of have a chance to look back and say, oh, geez, I don't know if one assessment would really cover all that. And you'd be right. So we really need to talk as a team about what things do we need to assess to be able to understand this young person's preferences and their interests, what they need, what their strengths are. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to that. As far as, what was the part of the question, Jennifer? I'm sorry.
Sorry, I live by a train yard. You guys are just gonna have to.
Jennifer, what was the other part of the question?
When did they begin?
Yeah.
Well, as far as the time when it's supposed to be, if you're saying if we're saying, we're going to stick with 16 right now, if we're saying that the transition plan will be in the IEP when the child is 16, actually those assessments need to start prior to or shortly after the child is 15. And the reason is because the transition plan is supposed to be in place in the school year in which the child turns 16. So if your baby turns 16 in April or in January, but the IEP isn't going to be done until April, then after last April's IEP meeting, you should probably have started, they should have started with assessments. They should have started with talking with you about the transition plan, what it does. So there aren't any surprises. I've had a lot of families just kind of call me in a shock because they thought they truly understood their IEP and knew what was going to come, how we were going to do it. And all of a sudden somebody was talking about a transition plan and it was like, what? What is a transition plan? What am I supposed to know? So it really does give an amount of time to get ready if we use that amount of time appropriately. And yeah, it should begin shortly after that 15-year-old IEP meeting to be able to get the job done. I hope that answered the question.
Sandy,
Not 15 minutes before the IEP meeting also.
Yes.
That would be not a good IEP. That would not be a good transition assessment.
So Sandy, then would that mean, since this, and I know it's a brand new change, so would it make sense that would then around their 13th birthday then start as this change goes into
effect? When the change goes into effect, we need to start looking at things at about the 13th birthday. Because what has happened often, and I think it's just a misunderstanding of rule and law, but what happens often is that there hasn't been an assessment done by the time that first transition plan is developed. And without what I said earlier, if you remember, without that assessment, then we don't have a quality transition plan. So those assessment kinds of things need to happen in advance. And so the sooner we make sense out of that, the better. And the sooner we jump into that, the better. And so needs to be a good discussion at that IEP about what kinds of assessments do we need to do? Mom and dad, your child better than anybody. Is independent living something that does make sense? Are we needing to look at that as a large piece of what we need to assess? So yeah, there's age appropriate assessments are just a massive part of what we do to start and develop a good transition plan. The transition plan should guide the IEP development. I think I've beat that to death. So what we're going to do is we're going to begin with the end in mind. The whole idea is that if we do what we've gotten blessing from the state, and we've had that now for about 4 years, where we're telling families that we think when they have a transition plan in their IEP, or they're going to develop its transition plan in the IEP, that really that's where the IEP meeting should start. It shouldn't start with page 1, going to page 2, going to page 3, but it should start with the transition plan, because at that age, the transition plan is really the most important part of the IEP. We've been working on other kinds of things, academic things, functional things, the speech language pathologist, the occupational and physical therapist. We've been working with those people for years. Now we've gotten to age 13, 14, and we've got to start thinking about the fact that we've only got so many years before we're done with school supports and services, and we need to get those transition plans developed in a positive way. And so to do that, you kind of have to look at what would that be. And certainly at age 13, we're not going to have, I want to be Superman is a possibility for a goal. But we need to find out what's so exciting about Superman that makes us want to go there. Or I want to be a professional football player. Question is that really about playing football? Is that really about the uniforms? Is that about the cheerleaders? Is it about, hitting people. I mean, what is it that, you know, kind of trips the trigger? We need to kind of dig a little deeper and figure those things out. But we know, because we've lived through it now for a number of years, that those plans, the idea of what interests me, what preferences I have will change dramatically from 13 to 18 or 21. So that's not a surprise, shouldn't surprise anybody, but we do need to get ready and to pay attention to the dreams of our kids, because they do have dreams. We should be results oriented in that process, and we should focus on improving, like I said earlier, the academic and functional achievement of the child. We've been doing that all along. That doesn't stop just because we've developed a transition plan. It's still a part of that transition plan process. It's supposed to be a coordinated set of services. Also include representatives from community-based adult service agencies. So like DHHS and that services coordinator from DHHS, from VR, the rep from VR, possibly a therapist. You know, it kind of depends on what the representatives in the community-based agencies are. Also including partnerships with community members, businesses, and organizations. And when I'm talking community members, I think we have a tendency when we go into IEP meetings all through elementary school, junior high, even the beginning of high school right now, we have a tendency to look at that it's the school and the parents, and that's it. And we're going to develop this thing and we're going to kind of get it done. As the young people get older and they are out in the community more and they're doing more kinds of things with businesses, with organizations and so forth, we need to look at what of those people also need to be a part of our planning for transition and looking at what does it look like as they become a young adult. So as far as community members, the pastor, possibly the piano teacher, one of the groups that we always leave out are peers. And I would say that for our young people who have multiple disabilities, and possibly, for example, are in a wheelchair, utilizing that as a way of movement around the school if they are not able to do that on their own. Very often other students are assigned to push the chair and do whatever's. Those kids learn a lot about our young people in their interactions, and they'll have ideas of things that might make sense. So consider inviting peers, consider inviting, you know, friend of a friend of the older sibling possibly, or, you know, the older sibling as well. But, you know, others as far as peers are concerned. As far as businesses, want to look at employers, people who have had our young person employed in the past, possibly a summer job, to bring those people in because they know what our young person can do on the job. And if we don't bring them in, we're missing a big part of what could be shared. If our young person, if we live 2 blocks from the little grocery store, and our young person goes down to that little grocery store almost every day to buy things or whatever, they've gotten to know our young person. That may be somebody that would be really good to have come to our IEP meetings because they know our kiddo in a different way. So just keeping those kinds of people in mind, as well as organizations like Special Olympics or Tennis Buddies and so forth. So keeping that in mind as possibilities. Then I talk about the goals, and when I've talked about strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, the acronym for that is SPIN. So if you can remember SPIN, you can remember that you're supposed to, when you go to the transition meeting, you're supposed to talk about strengths, preferences, interests, and needs. So we're supposed to get that in somewhere. And it's a long-term vision of what that is for our kiddo. So it's important that as a parent, we take the opportunity to talk that through, to spend time, overtime, talking about preferences and interests. We don't have to do the assessments, but we could sure learn a lot if we talk about preference and interests as we're talking about other things at home, and giving our children the opportunity to, you know, grow with and be a part of the family. So if we're making decisions about the family vacation, we want to make sure everybody has input. We talk about the finances of the family vacation. Our young adult needs to hear what's that all about, and well, how do we think? How are we putting that in? How are we processing all of that? Because it helps them learn how to do that. Those goals are also needing to be observable, measurable. Oftentimes they are not, as I see them as I look at IEPs on a fairly regular basis. So measurable, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then again, as I said, results oriented, so that we know that there's an identified outcome. It's not a process, it's an outcome. At least one goal for each adult outcome area, and we talked about what those were. Two of those, education, training, and employment, are required. And again, independent living is when appropriate, but I would say that, you know, that is fairly regular, that nowadays that we're having independent living goals. I would also tell you that those three areas lead to annual goals. So once we develop this goal, then we work through the rest of the transition plan and develop an annual goal that relates back to these, because we want to find a way that we're working on skills that are needed for these goals as well. So keep that in mind as we work our way through. I wanted to give you an example of a measurable post-secondary goal, kind of what it looks like and how it's supposed to be formulated. So after high school, or after graduation, or after obtaining the certificate of completion, or after getting the signed diploma, Billy Bob, because he's my favorite kid, will, and then what will Billy Bob do and where will Billy Bob do that? That's the measurable part. So when we're looking at examples in education and training, for example, after graduation from high school, Janice will enroll in Metro Technical Institute's 2-year diesel course. So we talk about after graduation, we talk about who this is about, which is Janice. And then we talk about what and where in the diesel course at the Technical Institute. We see it's a 2-year program, so it's measurable. And the fact that the institute is named also makes it a measurable piece. As far as like an employment goal, I wanted to give you examples of the two. Employment after graduation, again, that's the first part. Janice, who's our student, will increase her hours of work to 20 hours per week at Joe's Auto Shop. So for employment, we've got measurable goal in the fact that she's at the auto shop, has been obviously at the auto shop, because we're now increasing those hours to 20 hours a week. So that's the way a measurable post-secondary goal is supposed to look. It is about their future. It is not about while they're still in high school or while they're in junior high now, but it is about the future and what we're looking for as our young people leave the high school situation. So in this, you'll see that the yellow pieces as we go through are where I talk about the goals and then give you some ideas of what the goals could look like. So they're supposed to reflect the long-term education and that spin again that we talked about, observable and measurable, and then results oriented. So it would be like enroll in or work for. So we've got all of these listed. All of these start with after graduation, but it is the way of saying that that's a post-secondary goal. It's after graduation, and then we name the name of the student and we talk about the measurable part. We obtain the necessary training to be a fireman, attend NYU or Stanford and major in film production. I don't know who put that one in there, Holly. We'll attend a 1-year vocational training program to obtain a welding certificate, or will enroll in SECC full-time in the fall for a certificate in healthcare careers. So it is, again, the idea of after high school, Billy Bob will do what? And it's not difficult, but it is difficult, I will tell you, if your young person is saying, I wanna be a professional football player. So again, you're going to need to drill down to know what you want to put in as a goal for Billy Bob. The green sections are additional goal options because I thought it would be valuable for you to see what some of those are, because we have a tendency not to really understand or know what the possibilities are. So, you know, things like on-the-job training, apprenticeship programs, Job Corps, community colleges, four-year colleges and universities. Remember that these are written for all students who have an IEP. So we're talking about kids who maybe just have a speech language delay, have a very high IQ, for example, speech language delay, etc., or have autism, have a very high IQ, but have social skills issues, executive functioning issues, etc., etc. So we're looking at what might this student need. And again, it is so specific to individual kiddos. Holly, you want to talk a little bit about Think College and Nebraska Transition?
Sure. And this would be to get that college experience, but maybe have some limitations. But Think College is an awesome program. It allows for a career pathway. Might be the example that comes to mind is a young man who was really involved and wanted to do some law enforcement. And so he was enrolled in Think College. He was able to audit classes regarding criminal justice. And then he had an on-the-job training and internship with the security force at the college. So he got to kind of try out some things. So these are not traditional necessarily college programs. However, they're alternatives and it gives that college experience. And then Nebraska Transition College allows for an emphasis on independent living and again, getting into those college classrooms, settings, and getting to try out some things. And their emphasis is also employment. So it's giving that kind of 1-2 step to get to that employment, a little extra supports. But college comes in different shapes and sizes, and it's as Sandy said, it could be a 2-year program, it could be a 4-year program, it could be a 1-year program, it could be a certification. Metro Community College, lots of community colleges have shorter. They might have an 18-month certification program towards welding or something like that. So these are different ways to look at college.
I've had 3 students in the last 2 weeks that are going to culinary at Metro. So I'm excited to see if they still enjoy it after they're, you know, deep in it. But it'll be great it's great to watch, that's for sure. So there are things that you need to know about as far as post-secondary education accommodations. One of those is that a student does not have to identify that they're a student with a disability during the enrollment process. It is a choice. Our kids don't have to tell anybody that they have a disability or give any of that information. However, when they are registering for classes, they need to go to the disability coordinator, and it would be great if they would share with the disability coordinator the kinds of things that they know that they need to be successful. Our kids know themselves pretty well, and they can or don't have to talk about their disability, but it is important that the disability coordinator understands what they need and what should be available for them. My grandson, who's the young person that isn't the reason that I got involved in special education, but came along with a need. He went to college, junior college. He's a baseball player. So he started at junior college, and his first experience that first semester, he decided he wasn't telling anybody. He wasn't going to tell the tutors for the baseball team. He was telling no one. After the first semester, Ethan made the decision that maybe that was a mistake. And so he did go to the disability coordinator at the college, and also talked to the tutor for the baseball program, and life was a whole lot easier after he was able to share what his needs were. So keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you want to talk to disabilities coordinator, it is a very thorough listing that we have listed here for Went Ahead. It is the Western Iowa, Nebraska colleges and universities, and it gives all the information about who those people are that you need to contact at the college level.
And I just wanted to emphasize what Sandy's saying. If you're looking at college or community college or university, you do not have to identify as a person with a disability during the enrollment process, and you can decide to go through. If you're struggling and needing accommodations, we strongly encourage you to reach out. And I've also tell families, if you're looking to tour, you want to talk to the disability office and get a tour from them, because they are so helpful. And even if you're registering for classes, they might say, I take this professor. If there's two professors doing the same class, they might go, I take this guy. He's a little more, you know, he gets it more than the other guy, you know, so they're going to have some ins. And also the other thing too, I wanted to emphasize is that if you go with the IEP and you have a whole bunch of accommodations and modifications listed in your IEP, it's not going to be the same in college. So talking to that disability coordinator and seeing what your needs are going to be such a huge benefit.
Great point, Holly. Thank you. Yeah, that it is those accommodations that sometimes are done at high school and sometimes aren't, are still, you know, if there's 15 of them listed, I can guarantee you that the professors at the college will not be doing 15 accommodations, but you need to learn what they will accommodate and what they can do for you. It makes a huge difference.
And the other big point to make is that it's on the student to be advocating for themselves. Mom and dad aren't going to get notices if Billy Bob is struggling. So it's on Billy Bob. So there are ways through the disabilities office that a parent, the young adult can allow their parent to be included. But other than that, the college is not going to be calling mom and dad.
Holly,
Professors don't want to hear from you.
No.
I had a question, if there was any sort of nuance to that, if the young adult has a guardian.
Not that I'm aware of.
Again, they would still need to advocate for themselves, and through the student coordinator, student disability coordinator, that's an avenue to get assistance.
So then we talk about employment goals, and it's really similar or the same kinds of things. Again, highlighting that they're supposed to be long-term goals and SPIN, as well as measurable and observable. So we've listed a couple of them here, where Joe will be employed full-time in a sports-related career. Sarah will be employed as a vet tech for a minimum of 20 hours a week, or that Mike will be employed in the office setting for a minimum of 30 hours a week. So it's pretty specific, but that's really what they should look like by the time your young person is a senior or in 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. We ought to be getting more and more and more specific about the kinds of things that your young person would be doing. Here's some more options, and I think I wanted to put these out because I think we're making it look like it's all about, you know, working in an office, but well, we're going to go down even more particular or in more detail to attending and getting to work on time, working at a satisfactory rate, identifying career interests. Those are the kinds of things that you can't do, that you have to do as it, you know, in a minute way. So we need to really look at tighter goals that define pretty tightly what we want to do. And really the tighter the goals, the more defined the goals are, the better chance we have of having really good annual goals that will lead to the kinds of learning and training that our young people need. Because if it's tightened up, there's not much of a chance for things to kind of fly off into no man's land where we kind of think, oh, that didn't work very well. The tighter the goal, the tighter the information, the better off we are. Okay, the next one would be independent living goals. Again, we're looking at long-term, the kinds of things that your young person wants to do. But we're looking at, living in a college dorm. We're looking at the ability to budget income to maintain their bank account. We're looking at traveling in the community by public transportation. We're looking at joining the community choir as a recreational activity. Independent living isn't just, I know how to clean the house, I know how to cook my meals, and that's it. There's much more to independent living than what oftentimes we see on IEPs or that we talk about often. And then, more of the same kinds of things by making purchases, cleaning spaces in the home, cooking food, following recipes, knowing basic first aid, demonstrating good grooming habits, hiring and firing their own attendants and support staff. Again, another piece of independent living that we need to make sure that our young people, if they're capable of doing that, they need to have the opportunity and the right to hire and fire those folks as they see fit. So wanted to make sure that we listed that here, so we kept in mind that there are a variety of kinds of goals for all of our kids. It just depends on what their needs are. So when you complete a transition plan, there's a section in the law that talks about needs statements for transition services. And these are the areas: instruction related service, community experience, etc. And so what has to happen at high school to get us to the MPG, or the measurable post-secondary goals? So if we've got the measurable post-secondary goals, we've done the assessment, that's our foundation, we've developed the goals. Now we're saying, so what do we still need to learn to be able to get there? So it may be that under instruction, we need self-advocacy skills, or we need interview skills, or we need assistive technology, or we need, the burst team to come in because there's a brain injury, text to speech. It kind of depends on the student. Related services, we need transportation. We need to learn how to access transportation, need to explore access to adult OT and PT service, and on and on. I mean, there's listings here of every area. It's important that that you understand that there's supposed to be needs listed, so that we know the kinds of things that we're going to base those annual goals on. So if we have these things listed, we probably would have an annual goal that talked about self-advocacy skills, or we'd have an annual goal that might talk about need to join the rec center and how Billy Bob's going to do that. We may need to, the Center for Independent Living and that communication. So it really kind of depends on the student, but our annual goals could be clearly based on what's listed right here. As far as activities, there's also a section of the transition plan, and it's the last part actually, where we talk about what kinds of activities still need to be accomplished, the kinds of things that we need to make sure that we're doing. We could do it, with a group of kids, we could do it one-on-one, but it's the kind of thing that we need to be sure that Billy Bob has had the opportunity to experience based on what we know about him. So attending the Eastern Nebraska Transition Conference could be something. The Project Search Job Fair, and Holly will talk about Project Search later. Taking the pre-ACT, who's going to do that for our kiddo, and what's that look like? What's that cost? Who are those people out in the community to do that? Meeting monthly with the VR coordinator, counselor. Who, what's that look like? Who, what do they do? If we meet once a month, what happens? And then, leading their own IEP and being able to self-advocate in that way as well and self-determine. So there's a lot of ways that we can find activities that are part of Billy Bob's life that we still need to access.
So Sandy, you spoke in there about VR, and we had a question come in that it says, how would VR services tie into a high school transition plan?
Okay, Nebraska VR has what is called, let's go to the next one, Holly, it's okay.
Agree.
The Nebraska VR has a program called PREETS, and that's Pre-Employment Transition Services. And what that is for our kiddos who are on a transition plan, involvement of VR. VR is there to be a part of that whole plan, there to be a part of making sure that our young person has the opportunities that they can offer. So this transition slide, and we have some of these at the office, would be happy to share with folks, is a nice way to take a look at what is PREETS. So down the left-hand side where it says job exploration, work-based learning, counseling for transition and post-secondary progress, all 5 of those are actually PREETS kinds of things. That's what our VR counselors do. Those are the areas that they're supposed to be involved in. And then we have questions behind each one in the next row, and that would tell you the kinds of questions you could ask. As if you're talking to your VR coordinator and you're talking about work-based learning. So how are, multiple plans for transition coordinated? How do we, what do you do during work-based learning? So those are the questions that you might want to ask. And then under activities, clear there at the top, right there, we're looking at middle school, but in the actual slide, you can pull out the slide and it is 9th and 10th grade, 10th and 11th grade, 11th and 12th grade, and then above that age level. But you can make it be dependent upon, the age level that you're looking at. This just happens to be middle school age kiddos, which now is going to be a big deal as far as transition planning. But these are the kinds of things that could be done to support your young person to understand the transition into adult life, the way that they can, kind of determine their interests and preferences, just another way of giving them opportunities to see the world as a young adult. This slide also has resources listed. It's a multitude of information. So if you're at all interested in something like this, let us know, and we'd be more than happy to get it out to you.
Schools should have them. Yeah, schools should have them. And the other thing I would say for VR, especially, so PREETS, the pre-employment transition services in the state of Nebraska, it's 16 to 21. It may drop down to 14 to 21, but for every school, there is a VR counselor assigned. The VR counselor may have multiple schools, depending on how big they are. Or there might be 2 if it's a large school. But it's in preparation for getting ready for work. That's their emphasis. And the other thing to note is that for PREETS, pre-employment transition services, that 16 to 21, you just need to be potentially eligible for VR services as an adult. So there's not other qualifying. You don't have to have a certain type of disability or a certain level of disability for the pre-employment transition services, 16 to 21. So thinking about young adults, they are all eligible for a VR, to have interactions with VR. I know during the pandemic, there was lots of Zooming going on. It might not have been as present, but the not sure. I think they're transitioning to doing in person, and
Yes.
yeah, and so they might, in a typical school year, what VR counselors are in the schools and meeting with students. They might do a class. They might actually teach as part of a classroom to all of the students. They might meet one-on-one. There's a variety of ways that they're interacting at that age. And that's different from adult services. So hopefully that answered your questions. In high school, there is a VR presence at that age because of the pre-employment transition services that PREETs. It's a guaranteed funding. I know people may have heard that there's a wait list for VR services. That's for adult services. There is not for young adults, for the PREETs.
I would also tell you that for VR, they also are now fully, they also have now everybody hired. So we're in pretty good shape. And as far as the adult waiting list kinds of things that have been there for a number of years, the level 1 is already, that's closed, and people have services. They're totally taken care of. We're working on level 2, and so they're moving through pretty rapidly to get adult services into place. So keeping our fingers crossed that in about a year there won't be any wait list at all for VR. That's the hope anyway.
Yeah, I think it's gone down from when I started tracking about from 30, if I remember correctly, 3,700 to we're at maybe 1,200 on the wait list.
Yep. Yeah.
So
it's moving right along. And
yeah.
Every time I start working with a family, the first thing I do is ask them to take a look go to Nebraska VR and take a look at their website. It is loaded and will tell you exactly what it is that you could expect. But they do things, they buy equipment for people. If you need a specific kind of uniform for your job, they may be able to purchase that. If you need specific equipment, they may be able to purchase that. I mean, there is money available to do a variety of kinds of things to make you a successful adult. So keep that in mind, because Nebraska VR has a lot of options. And so, like I said, that's one of the first things I do with families is to send them to Nebraska VR. It's a really important piece of this.
They can help pay tuition. They can help if there's specific training for a particular job. They can help with that certification. They're all about getting to that end point with success.
So we talk a little bit about portfolio development here, and it's important that you have, things kind of pulled together in one place. And we talk about, visual resume for some of our young people, as well as pictorial representation of abilities. It's important that we find a way to be able to demonstrate and to be able to allow our young people to be able to say, this is who I am. I would also tell you that if you develop a portfolio, no matter what the disability level of your young person, what I would say to you is to develop a portfolio that kind of holds on to information about the skills that they have, what's worked this year, what didn't work this year. We tried this and this and that didn't happen. And keep track of those kinds of things, because at the end of their career, the school district is responsible to give your student a summary of performance. You won't hear about that anywhere until the end of the school year when they hand it to you, unless I'm telling you now. So I'm taking my chance because I think it's really important. But the summary of performance is really supposed to be a document that would give overall important information to the next person involved with your young person. in their lifetime. So everything we learned in school, everything we learned about the kind of student they are, everything we learned about their functional skills, everything we learned about the way that they enjoy employment, the way they got excited about a specific kind of employment, those kinds of things. That is everything that we need to know to be able to send our young person off to possibly a DD services coordinator, possibly an employer, possibly to college. But that summary performance document, if we keep a portfolio of information and then we support the school, my supporting statement is that I think that if I was a parent, with Ethan being in college now, it's too late, but if I had it to do over, we would have talked about the summary of performance every single IEP meeting, 10 minutes. We would have talked about what needs to be in the summary performance for this year, the kinds of things we learned about Billy Bob and the kinds of things that, you know, that we learned didn't work, as well as the things that we learned about Billy Bob outside of school, anything that is of interest. And you know, I've had some teachers say to me, well, you know, if you have a young person who has multiple disabilities, you really don't need to do a summary performance. And in all actuality, those young people probably need it more, because everything from how the wheelchair needs to be set to the way the tray needs to be put on to the way that the information carrier is set so I can push my head one way or the other. I mean, you name it, it all needs to be in there. And if we don't give all that information, somebody's got to deliver that information to the next people. So if we can collect it as a parent set, as a group of parents, and we can then talk our school into giving 10 minutes a year to that summary performance, when it happens at the end of when they graduate and they get their diploma, they also get the summary performance. That summary performance would have value. And if your young person, what we know is that the research says if your young person's involved in developing the summary performance, then they will use it. So they would take it to the disabilities coordinator at the college. They would take it to their next employer. They would, take it to whatever's next, so that those folks have an idea of what worked and what didn't work, and who I am as a person. So when a portfolio development is a little more, I got a little more excited there than what that says. Anyway, and then planning for adult services. It's important that we identify the resources that we need to accomplish goals, who those key adult services and funding organizations are. And so again, we want those people to attend the IEP meeting, understand that by law, they're not to attend unless you have given permission. And that needs to be somehow noted in the IEP that you gave permission for their attendance as a parent. It's the legal piece. So keep that in mind, that you will be asked to give your permission for DD, VR, whoever, to attend the IEP meetings, and anybody else that's from outside of the school system. So if you have an employer come, if you have your pastor come for some reason, or whoever, they'll need permission to be able to invite those folks.
Next.
So getting down to the end here, it's important that we've talked about beginning with the end in mind. We've talked about conducting those assessments and how important those are. We've talked about that the post-secondary goals should drive the IEP, and to do that, one way to do that would be to begin with the end in mind. Also would be that would be where you'd start the IEP meeting, that the comprehensive transition assessment tools need to be used, and that those tools are either informal or formal. So you know that. What we don't want is what do you want to be when you grow up 30 minutes before the IEP meeting. That doesn't work. And unfortunately, it does happen. But what we want is, as we talked about, we want the foundation laid with the age appropriate transition assessments. We want the ground laid and the 2x4s coming up when it comes to education, training, employment, and independent living. Those are the pieces that lead us then to the annual goals, and that transition plan is our leadership document when it comes to this age group. I want to make sure that you know that there are regional transition facilitators across the state of Nebraska now. That just happened last year. Those folks have purchased assessments for checkout, so school districts can contact there's 6 educational service units in the state that have those facilitators. I can get you a listing of those if you want. And so they've got materials and assessments for checkout. They'll do training. They will give you guidance if you have questions about how to write the transition plan and how that's all supposed to be put together. A part we didn't talk about tonight is that whole, the courses that our kids take and the listing and the way that needs to be done. There's so much that is, has a legal requirement to it, but we wanted to get to some of the really most important pieces now. And regional transition facilitator certainly is a huge piece that you need to be aware of. In summation, talk to your child about their strengths, preferences, interests, and needs, or SPIN. It's important that that's kind of an overall conversation on a semi-regular basis where we, talk about, well, how do you feel about that? Or take a look at that. Does that look like fun? Or, just to talk through things with the kids, help them learn how to process how you're thinking as well. Like I said, I talked to you about going on vacation. How do you process all of that? Because the more they know how you think, the easier it is going to be for them to think things through. We want to make sure that you communicate with the school if you have concerns. Nothing worse than being an educator and having a parent come in that's had concerns for 6 months and hasn't said a word, because they're usually upset by then. And it's really tough to make that relationship work again and to pull things back together. So if you have concerns, if there's a problem, make sure that you communicate. Do your research, know what is supposed to be in the transition plan and how it's supposed to work. I have numerous documents that I could share if you're interested. Also on our website, you can see a couple of webinars on the summary of performance as well as graduation, and then that transition plan and how it's put together. Also prepare for meetings in advance. And I think that's one thing that Holly and I probably harp at parents about. And I do push and shove on it because it's so important that parents need to be ready. And so to know what's required in the documents, and then to be able to say, these are the things that we talked about at home at the kitchen table. Billy Bob and Dad and I talked about these things. And so these are the things that we think are important. And make sure you take your notes along. Don't make those notes and leave them on the kitchen table.
And just to jump in with what Sandy was saying, oftentimes as a mom who had been through those IEP meetings, like this kind of information, wow, that would have been helpful to know back then. And oftentimes it's 1 or 2 parents versus like 12, the professionals who've gone to school for this and they know everything. So what am I to do to say, ask a question about? So having this type of information will allow you to say, so the transition plan, so what we need to talk about the goals, like you'll be able to ask some questions, the right questions. And here comes the 739. Whoa.
So the next step would be the action steps. And again, I think some of these obviously were on this slide as well, but you want to participate as best you can in the IEP process. We have all kinds of forms that would allow you to do that better. Some planning kinds of things that you could do at home and so forth. So don't hesitate to ask us if you want to see what it would be like, or what our forms might be like. as far as just getting you prepared for that IEP meeting, let us know. We've got a variety of documents. Encourage your child's interests. Allow your child to make mistakes without consequence. That's one of the ways that we learn is to make mistakes. And then to practice adult skills as a family. So my dad was high on be the girl with my car, knowing how to change the tire, how to do the oil, how to check the windshield washer fluid. Same kind of thing across the board with our kids. They have to be able to know how to do things as a young adult. So don't hesitate to do those things, because they will be important as time goes by. And that's my portion of things. Do you have any more questions for me, Jennifer?
Nope, we haven't had any come in yet.
All righty.
You covered everything.
Everything's clear as mud, clear as mud. And I'm gonna start
I'm trying
in.
to hurry because I didn't know what time it is.
We're good. We know that it's 7:39 because of the train. So, so I'm gonna kind of tag off of what Sandy was been talking about, setting the stage for employment, because after school there's what? There's life. And we talked about it briefly when we were talking about colleges, and if that's the plan, that there is a different type of what the rules are, what the law is actually regarding what your rights are. And in an education type setting, if you're thinking of that 0 to 21, the plan is set up for that child. Services are provided. There's kind of no question. It's under the IDEA. That's the law. They are provided those services. When you get into, as we talked about, college, employment, then it kind of switches over where that person has to advocate for themselves. They have to ask for things. There might be some particular eligibility requirements. In order to ask for reasonable accommodation, you need to say, I have a disability. This is how it affects me in a work setting. And so there is some different types of approaches to that. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. We have a whole month dedicated to raising awareness that people with disabilities can work, should work. And the thing that is striking about that is because we've been through a horrendous year, right? Where we had over 22 million people lost their jobs. Our economy is bouncing back. And I think the national unemployment rate is at 6.1, I believe it is. In Nebraska, we're at 4.1 or 4.2, so we're even lower. And you're hearing a lot on the news that we can't find people to work. And I'm like, we got people, we got lots of people love to work. We want, like, so come on. Unfortunately, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is staggering. It's like 29%. It's just really horrendous. So we wanna help you showcase that employment is a possibility, and it comes in lots of different sizes, shapes, and sizes. And so I'm gonna run through some things about employment. Work is important because we want our young adults to be confident, self-reliant. We want them to have a great quality of life, right? Work is part of life. I don't know if you can tell if anybody looks familiar or similar. Yeah, that's my baby boy, who's not a baby anymore. He's 29. But work is definitely a part of life. It's how I've met some great friends. It's how, increasing your social network, your as well as financial independence. So there's so many assets to working. Families contribute to the employment process because they know their kid. They know what kind of juices them up and what could kind of set them off. And so that kind of information is huge. And when Sandy was talking about that transition plan, that's kind of information which is great to bring to the table. The classic example for me is my darling boy. When I went to an IEP meeting and he was going to be a chef, and I was like, "Oh, he is? Oh yeah, he wants to be a chef." That's what the school is telling me, and I was like, "Oh, he is so lazy he won't even put his frozen waffle into the toaster." So you think he's going to chop up vegetables, be a sous chef for somebody? I don't know. I think we need to dig a little deeper. And then I went to a VR meeting. Oh, Peter wants to be an archaeologist. What? Yeah, he wants to be like Indiana Jones. Well, in talking to him, he wanted to be like Indiana Jones because Indiana Jones got the girl. It wasn't about archaeology. So we keep asking those questions. But other ways that parents and families are so instrumental in contributing to the employment process. Networking. You might know somebody that works in it. You might have a bring your kid to work on Wednesday, but your child doesn't want to do what you do, but maybe Sally, who works down the hall from you, maybe she has a job that might be more interesting or might kind of tap into that.
The network idea, Holly, my grandson is needing to move to Wichita, Kansas to play baseball for the summer because that's part of what they do. And one of the moms that I have supported, she and her son over the last couple of years, we just happened to be talking, and I never talked to her about my family or anything, and I have no idea how it came up, to be really honest. But anyway, I just happened to mention that he was looking for, a place to live, and come to find out that her brother lives in Wichita, Kansas, and he owns apartments. And guess what? So when you're talking about networking, it comes out of the blue.
Totally.
Keep it in mind.
Totally. I can honestly say that every single job I've ever gotten in my life is because I have known someone. They have helped me get my foot in the door. I've had to prove myself, but every job is because I've known somebody said something, or so those are great things. Also, families can help participate in the problem solving. If there's an issue that comes up, they could inform the job coach if there's any problems that have come up maybe at home that might affect productivity or something. And kind of tag on to Sandy mentioned one of the goals or one of the activities that can be on an IEP is learning to hire and fire your staff. So families can monitor the service quality and the service delivery if there's if that young adult is connected with a program. And I love to talk about the person-centered planning that's really has exploded in Nebraska recently. HHS has a new initiative that they're really putting a lot of time and energy into, and has we just completed year 1 of training for on person-centered planning to over 650 service coordinators at DD. So person-centered planning is a way to look at the big picture, looking at how those strengths, preferences, interests, and needs that spin, how that will really affect all aspects of life. And so I did kind of want to promote and just give you a heads up that on the DHHS website, it talks about that person-centered planning. And included in that is 10 webinars. They're about an hour long each. And they talk about person-centered planning. And a number of them have such cool out of the box thinking type jobs. And, you know, a traditional job isn't 9 to 5 anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. But so just kind of thinking outside the box, what does employment look like for our youngster?
And certainly consider for young people who cannot speak for themselves or who have multiple disabilities, it's important that you can consider the person-centered planning as a way to go about making some decisions and determinations, because that would be a larger group of people, you know, talking for your young person and putting some ideas together. So it is another way of thinking about giving information.
And a person-centered plan isn't an IEP, but a lot of aspects included in a person-centered plan can be included in an IEP. It's an informal way to talk about those long-term goals. It can be used as part of discovery for voc rehab. It can be used in to gather information for a one-page resume. All of that kind of things it all works together. And then when I'm talking about employment, again, I am the biggest cheerleader for outside the box thinking. And so thinking about those parts of those strengths, those preferences, interests, needs, what does that look like in the world of work? And a reminder for everyone that everybody has a starter job. I am not still working at Goodrich Dairy. That was my first job. It was a great job. But I'm not running the company right now. So everybody has the starter jobs. I think sometimes families are like, we put all of our eggs in one basket. Okay, they're finally employed. Well, they could be sailing along doing great, and then 4 months in, they get a new manager who doesn't think the same way as the previous manager does, and things change, and it can be uncomfortable and unbearable. Things happen. The other thing I want to emphasize is not all jobs are paying. Volunteering does count. You're building those work skills by, you know, mowing the lawn or helping out at church or any type of thing where you can be increasing your interactions with others, practicing communication, practicing organizing, getting things done, following steps, all of that would count towards building that on those work goals or work skills, excuse me. And then we talked about voc rehab a little bit ago about the pre-ETs. One of the big things they have is a work-based learning opportunities, also through transition programs, those 18 to 21 programs. And then kind of not really talked about a whole bunch is workforce development. In Omaha, we have the One Stop American Job Center, and that's anybody can walk in the door and get assistance with looking at employment. They also have different programs that specifically cater to youth, in school and out of school youth, and they might have an emphasis on training or apprenticeships. All of that is free. And so those are things to look at. Also, just kind of wanted to run down what work could look like. So in an integrated competitive employment, typically that's 20 hours a week or more, minimum wage or higher. And we say 20 hours a week or more. So let's say Billy Bob gets a job and he works Tuesdays for 2 hours in the afternoon. Well, if Billy Bob misses a Tuesday, he might not be, the business might not feel the impact of that. But if Billy Bob works 4 hours a day for 5 days a week, if he's not there for his shift, the manager's like, wait, where's Billy Bob? We need this. He's doing something that that's going to be missed if he is not at work that day. There might be individualized supports. I know I use lots of color coding. That's my individual support. You know, so everybody might be using some accommodations, but we don't necessarily need to go to HR and ask for a reasonable accommodation form. But so that can come in a smaller size individualized supports or natural supports. And then there's also supported and customized employment. This is more catered to people who might need more supports in a work environment. But as far as a supported employment setting, again, it would be real work in an integrated business. They might receive assistance from a job coach. They could receive ongoing support services through VR. And typically that's a job match where their skills match with what the setting is, what the work setting is. And then as far as customized employment, that is more geared towards a one-on-one, where there might be a job developer who really looks at the business first and kind of looks at what kind of needs do you guys have? And I might have somebody who could fill that need. And so it's more of negotiation, the needs of that employer, and then fitting what that individual, what their work skills are. That's more of a one-on-one situation, and there could be assistance from a job coach with that as well. Self-employment is people with disabilities make up the highest number of people who are self-employed. And but you can't just like, hey, I have this great idea and start it, you know, how do I get an account on Etsy? You kind of have to there's some steps to it. So you have to come up with a business plan, develop that business plan, obtain startup funds, who's going to fund that, and then arrange supports if those are needed. Nebraska Voc Rehab in their adult program, they have an awesome self-employment program as part of the services that they offer, where they do training on how to start your own business. But the nice thing about self-employment is the flexibility. You're able to make your own choices, be more independent. You can decide when you want to work, who you want to work with, who you want to work for, what jobs to take or not. And it really can build that self-esteem, that self-confidence, as well as increasing the economic self-sufficiency. And Sandy mentioned this before, but Project Search is one of the categories that we have falling under employer-initiated employment model. So Project Search was started in 1996, and it was started at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. And the hospital is seeing high turnover in certain jobs. So they were always having to refill these jobs. And so they were looking at strategies and solutions to assist. And they connected with schools and with their Voc Rehab. And together they came up with this awesome program called Project Search. It's it occurs during a school year. Typically, it's designed for those students who are in their last year of high school or transition program. And so it runs as part of the school day. And for the designated business, they choose a rotation, and typically there's 3 rotations throughout a school year. So they really get to understand and learn about a job, and they might find a stronger aptitude for some than others, but they are always building on building up those work skills. And then what's cool thing about Project Search is in some of the programs, the student has to resign from their current position. So they practice that, and then they have to apply for the other department that they might want to, that they're going to transition to into the next semester. And so they have to practice those skills. And the outcome for Project Search is really, they are targeting with getting young adults employed and keeping them employed. So they're practicing all those wonderful work skills, and they get feedback from their direct supervisors. There's also a connection with a teacher, it might be a job coach also there. The other cool thing about Project Search, which is unique, is that typically it might be in a special education setting. Okay, you might be in a inclusive classroom, but then during lunch, all the kids in special ed get together and they're at the same table for lunch. With Project Search, you're eating with your department, with your coworkers. You're really integrated into that job and that placement. As I said, Nebraska has a nice, robust Project Search emphasis. And when I mention that pre-employment transition services, PREETs through VR, this is one of the things that they're doing great. So here are some of the sites and then the school districts that are connected with Project Search. And there's 14 that we're going this year. In previous years, we had 16, I think. But through the pandemic, we lost a couple and they're on hold. But as you can see, they're larger businesses. Typically, it's over 200 staff already employed there. So it could be hospitals, Walmart distribution center out in North Platte, a couple of different hospitals, and what was the Embassy Suites, several hotels. So again, looking at the employers, like we have a high turnover in these areas, and this is this helps train potential staff for that. The young adult isn't necessarily have to work, become employed by that business, but it gives them skills to transfer over. And then in Nebraska, we have one hybrid adult, young adult and adult site, and that's at University of Nebraska Medical Center, UNMC. And in speaking with the previous coordinator of that program, he said he had 56 different rotation opportunities available. And so when you think about a hospital, it's got all kinds of different types of departments. It could be nursing, it could be at the cafeteria, it could be security, it could be, I work with one young man who was very particular, and he liked things done a certain way. And he did the adult Project Search, and he was really, really great at the sterilization for equipment. And so he got a job doing that. So it's a really cool way to get your foot in the door, I guess, at a business. And you come away with an awesome resume. So there are some resources, and a lot of them, or several of them we've talked about, but just kind of want to hit this, that VR, one of the other things under PREETs is that they offer summer programming. And so if you look at the VR website under the students tab, it'll list all the different opportunities that are available for this summer. And it could be work-based learning. It could be where you're doing some trial job work, or it could be something like advocacy, some more Zoom type stuff. So there's a wide variety of different programs that are available this summer. And then one thing that families might be nervous about is if their young adult is receiving SSI, and connected with that is their Medicaid. And so they're nervous about whether or not employment would affect those benefits. So I strongly, highly, fervently recommend connecting with a benefits specialist. That's somebody who can help you understand the eligibility criteria and the impact of work on the benefits, and then how to use work incentives. It is ideal to meet before starting work, but you can do it after. It's just a great way to kind of help you figure out and navigate. I list a few of the work incentives. These are some that are more well known. There's about 26 work incentives, and I can talk very surface level on some of these, but WIPA, a benefits specialist, is going to be someone who's going to really understand those eligibility criteria and how to navigate those. You can connect with a benefits specialist through Social Security itself. Goodwill of Greater Nebraska also has benefits counselors, as well as Easter Seals of Nebraska. So that's somebody I would push you towards if you're receiving SSI. Another great resource and support would be assistive technology. Assistive technology can come in low tech, high tech items. This might be something that is discussed during the IEP process, is what kind of accommodations, might be equipment, might be the way the room is laid out, so that if that young adult is in a wheelchair, that they can navigate in and out independently. And so in Nebraska, we have Assistive Technology Partnership, or ATP, is under that Nebraska VR umbrella. And they can help set up accommodation. They can talk to employers. They can talk and teach how to use equipment, find the best solution so that you can be the most productive you can be. Nebraska does have a loan program available at www.at4all. And that's something you can kind of scroll and see if they have equipment that you might want to try it before you buy it. So those are really great tools to use. Also, there's private assistive technology specialists. They might be able to do the evaluation to see what you might need. And one thing I just kind of want to emphasize, if your young adult has a job coach through their work to assist them with the getting tasks done, that job coach might not have expertise in using assistive technology. And so I would highly recommend that you utilize assistive technology partnership. There's also a program under ATP that works in the education realm. And so if your young adult is getting to that 16, 17, 18, and they might be looking at trying out some jobs, I would strongly recommend that you invite that ATP education person to an IEP to make sure they're ready for those next steps. And then there's good old PTI. That's Sandy and Holly and I in the gang. And as part of under pre-employment transition services, that VR PREETs is what funds my grant. And so I run a program called Family Employment Awareness Training. And if you've heard so much today or have some questions, I just happen to have a workshop that starts tomorrow morning at 10. Go ahead, register, see if I care. The more the merrier. But it's tomorrow 10 to 2, and then Saturday 10 to 2. And hopefully we'll get to be in person here by the fall. But it's a great way to hear more about employment and the different types of employment and the different supports that are available for employment. A couple of little things. When Sandy was talking about assessments, and I was talking about person-centered planning, there are some very easy and tools that might assist a family bring some information to the table for an IEP or person-centered planning, or when they're meeting with VR to talk about employment, but to look at what kind of things are really helpful for my young adult, and what would be helpful for others to know. So if Billy Bob loves trains, he can live at my house for all, yeah. But if he likes quiet, he's not gonna like my house or working near my house. Does Billy Bob like to be around a lot of people, or a few people, or does he like to communicate? Would he be good at indoors or outdoors? Would he enjoy repetition, where every day he comes in and the job is the same, and that's comforting, it's consistency? Or would he prefer variety, where every day is a new day? You come in and there might be different tasks that you're asked to do. So thinking about those kind of things are awesome tools to bring to the table when you as a family are talking about employment. Another thing, this did not translate well, but we have a little worksheet called Greatness Planning. And this, I would say, is the in the car tool for those conversations that you're having with your youngster, and you're gathering information and they don't even know it. But it's something that you can also bring to an IEP or a person-centered planning, but to find out some information about them, what makes you unique, and having them talk about themselves. That's, again, practice on self-advocacy. What kind of things do you really hate? Things like that. So that's very fun little tools. And here are Holly's action steps for employment. Model work expectations. So practicing those soft skills at home. Is Billy Bob getting up on his own? Does he hit the snooze 14 times and then you eventually have to go in and get him up? Assign responsibilities, hold them accountable. So I have experience of working with a young man, and he typically used a wheelchair, but for 30 minutes of his shift, he used a walker, and so he could exercise his legs. And he came to a meeting and he came with his walker, and then I was talking to his parents and his dad, and then the young man was like, "Dad, can you get my walker?" And he was in like an office chair, and I go, "You are literally in a wheelie chair. Go get it yourself." And his dad was like, "Oh, I should do that more at home." I was like, "Yeah, you do, because you're not going to be there at work to go get this. Like, you want to encourage independence." And then maintaining high expectations, mentoring. We mentioned this before, but looking at that, looking at your experiences. Is there somebody that can be influential, and you can set up a volunteer type work setting that builds those skills, and you can something to add to the resume. Try lots of different experiences, so that they can try different types of jobs. They might not love the job that they get assigned to do, but I assure you, they're going to take away some skills, even if they know for sure, I don't like this type of work, right? So cross that off the list. And then networking, utilizing those relationships, and in your community, in your family. Lots of times parents might be involved in a parent support group, and we come from all walks of life, but our child might have a disability that's in common. But making those connections, hey, where does your husband work again? Do you think Billy Bob could do a shadow, job shadow for a couple hours just to see what that employment setting is like? Using that network. And then remain involved. Discuss those long-term plans with your child. Participate in the IEP and transition planning process, as we talked about earlier. Identifying strengths. Be part of the team, networking, get Input from family, friends, neighbors, teachers, people who have known your young adult in a variety of situations. We talked a lot about that earlier with Sandy. If your young adult goes to GameStop all the time, they might know the manager, or the manager might know them by sight. So that's a connection that potentially you can say, hey, do you ever need, part-time help, or somebody to help stock shelves or rotate merchandise, anything like that. Vacuum the carpet. He doesn't have to do, so all kinds of different types of things. And then for employment, this is Holly on her soapbox. Be proactive. For when you get a job, you need to fill out your I-9 documents, which requires you to have your social security card and a current photo ID. So find that birth certificate, find that social security card, get a photo ID. If your young adult isn't going to be driving, you can get a state ID. It's also at the DMV. It costs a little money, but it's going to last for years, and it's going to be a huge tool for them when they get their first job. That's all the things I got to say. How'd I do?
Thank you so much, Sandy and Holly. That was excellent. Thank you. Jennifer, do we have any other questions that have come in the chat, or does anyone have any other questions they'd like to ask either Sandy or Holly?
There's nothing currently
Okay.
in the chat. So again, you must have done a really great job and
Yeah.
covered everything that there is to know.
Please keep in mind that, we have a ton of materials at the office and online on our server, and would be more than happy to share. If there are pieces of this that you think, boy, I'd love to know more, let us know. We're more than happy to share anything that we have.
That's great. That's great. Well, I think what I will do then, I will go ahead and put our kind of closing poll up. And thank you again to Sandy and Holly for taking this time to present to our families and our participants. Thank you for joining us tonight at this as we're wrapping up the school year to go ahead and get some more information. I really appreciate everybody being here. And then Jennifer, if you have any further questions that come in, just let us know. But if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of minutes to go ahead with that poll, that would be great.
Thanks very much for the opportunity, Rhonda.